Well, yeah, it is my life. I mean, it's sort of. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how people live that aren't artists. It's just, it's my life. It's what I do. Okay, my name is Jane Byers, and I have a number of works in the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery collection. I'm not exactly sure how many. It's maybe 8, 10, something like that. I like making stuff that takes a long time, that's very involved, that's hard in terms of the sense of labor. I don't know, I guess when I think about the ways that I've worked, I think I like media where there's some kind of resistance. The trouble with paint is it's too globby and formless. But so printmaking, I enjoyed, especially etching, a lot of resistance there. And sculpture, I've done a lot of different work in sculpture with wood and bronze casting, a number of different things. And then drawing has been a constant practice. And I mean, pretty much all the drawing I've done has been, for finished work. I very rarely do anything very substantial as a kind of preliminary drawing. I mean, I do some odd little maquette type things, but I don't, when I put it to a drawing, I don't sort of plan it out. And then when I'm doing a sculpture, I certainly don't do any kind of a plan in terms of a drawing or... Anyway, so I'd say, yeah, mostly a lot of things except painting. When you make bronze, you make a wax, which is really fun. Wax is a beautiful material to work in, very forgiving, but really, there's so much you can do with it. And then, it gets put in this gets encased in this stuff, and then you put it in a kiln, and it's, heated up to, I don't know, millions of degrees of temperature, and then out of it comes this thing, this charred black thing. It's like, oh, God, is that what I made? And then you have to spend ages, fixing this thing up because there's stuff that's globbed on and there's holes that didn't get filled. And, because it's like it's a huge change in what goes on between the wax and then the cast. So one of the reasons is bronze is very expensive to do. The foundry is filled with people with skills who are fixing up these things that came out of the kiln, like welding and chasing and, making it to get it back to what it was that you wanted when you brought it in. Saying that there was one time when I went down, the guy that I worked with was, just sort of his own operation. So he would have, mostly people weren't doing very large work. So he'd need to collect a bunch of people that had waxes that they wanted to make the kiln process worth it. So there's one time when I'd gone down with some stuff and there was about 8 of us. And there was something really wrong with, I don't know what, the crucible or something. Something was wrong with the kiln, didn't reach the right temperature. I'm not sure what the thing was. But anyway, when the stuff came out, all of it was like almost unusable. But I looked at my stuff and I thought, wow, this is great. This is like way better than anything I could have made. So that then got me onto a whole thing that I started, as I worked more with the process, I came to understand that, okay, if I do this, then I think when it's in the kiln, it's going to twist, so that'll be good. Or if I make this part like a really thin, I bet I'll get holes there. So I started to really work with that, the accident of the process, what could happen. And mostly it kind of worked out the way I hoped. So I've always worked with things that are, they talk about human culture. They bring in the presence of the human, like tools. When you look at them, you need to think, well, I could pick that up and hold it, I could do something with it. So there's always the presence of human activity and human culture in my work, but it doesn't picture people. It's through objects. I was attracted to handheld tools as, like because it does bring in the presence of the body, but also they're just really interesting to look at. Like there's some weird stuff out there in the tool world. When you actually look at a lot of these things, there's all kinds of well, first of all, sometimes you're like, what would somebody do with this? That's like really weird. But then the other thing was like, well, look at this here. Now I can see, okay, here's the part that's supposed to do something useful, whatever that was. But what about this thing here? There's like all this kind of detail here with some carving and so there's all like extra stuff that it's nothing to do with the practicality, that the person who made it, was proud of what they did and they put this stuff in. Extra things. So that, wow, that's like really interesting. So I just found a lot of, interesting things going on with the tools. But the other thing that was really fun because they were done over, the series ended up being over, a number of years. And I had different exhibitions that had some of them in it. And they were probably the works, of any of my works, the ones that elicited the most interest and feedback from people. And particularly from men. There'd be a lot of guys who'd come up to me and say, I don't like art very much, and I come to these things with my wife, but you know what? I really like your work. It's not art. It's really interesting. Things like that. Or sometimes guys would come up to me and they'd say, I heard you talking to some other people early in the gallery, and you were pointing out to something. You said that you liked the shape of it. You had no idea what it is. I know what that is. I can tell you what that is. So it was really fun. There was a lot of stuff that happened like that. There's that whole sort of thing about ornament, decoration, and functionality, that ornament and decoration have been largely, more in modern culture and Western culture, often been, sort of relegated to, the feminine. They're not essential, they're not important, they're, some side thing. But, there's cultures where, ornament, like Islamic cultures and other ancient cultures where, like ornament was huge. And even in Western culture, there's been times where ornament was very, very important and not seen as sort of just decorative and unnecessary and lacking function. It had function, So I'm interested in that whole discourse around, like, how do some things get to be seen as decorative and therefore not terribly important? And how do other things get seen to be, this stuff's really important. This is, we need this is, and, usually those things fall into the important stuff. Is the stuff related to things that men are doing, and the decorative stuff, that's for women, that's in the kitchen or something. So that, that whole complex dialogue about how we assign meaning to things and how it circulates through cultures, I find very interesting. But all of the botanicals that I've used, they're not from, like, I don't come up in the garden and do drawings of plants. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing that. That's something, practice that I like, but that's not where the work comes from. It comes from material culture. It comes from jewelry, from scarves, from textiles, from ceramic plates, and it's mostly all things that are connected to the idea of women in the home, making it beautiful with a lot of flowery things, the whole sort of. Anyway, but I like the that when you think of the idea of a bouquet or a wreath, it's a very loaded sort of thing. Like wreaths are and bouquets are, to celebrate, to show love, for funeral things. I mean, there's, can be about death. It can be about an honorific thing. So there's a lot of big moments sort of tied in with the idea of the bouquet or the wreath. And of course, any botanical reference, whatever it is, always is about, the fleetingness of life, because, if it's in bloom, well, it's the next stage is for it to fade and die. So I think it's sort of, the cycle of life is kind of built into the imagery to begin with. Well, yeah, I don't know. I think I don't have any secrets to pass on, that's for sure, and how to have a successful career. I should ask somebody that myself. But I guess really, for me, it's always been work. You can't be an artist if you're not making work. So, and you have to make work in the circumstances that you have. Like, you can't wait until you have enough money or enough space or enough this or that. Like, you have to make it work where you are right now, that you can work. So if you've only got a table, then make stuff you can do on a table. And if you've got to share with other people, then make sure you're not using stuff that's smelly and stinky and makes a mess. So you have to work it out with the circumstances that you have to make it possible to work. Do it often. Do a lot and often.